Do you hate being lied to? I hate being lied to. And this video is about you being lied to by the Democrat Party regarding all of these election integrity reforms that have been happening across the country, but especially in places like Georgia, in my home state of Texas. They'll say things like it's racist voter suppression, it's threatening democracy, stealing the right to vote. They'll talk about these election law reforms being Jim Crow laws on steroids, Jim Crow 2.0. Here's the truth about what's actually getting passed and how that matches up against the Democrats' dishonest rhetoric. First, let's look at Georgia. Joe Biden claimed that the laws passed there amount to Jim Crow on steroids. It must be pretty bad, right? Jim Crow voting restrictions, by the way, included poll taxes, literacy tests, and other racist means to forcibly prevent black people from voting. So these Georgia laws have to be much worse than those Jim Crow laws, right? Because these are Jim Crow on steroids. Well, no. Even the Washington Post had to debunk Joe Biden's lies about the Georgia laws, saying in reality, election day hours were not changed, and the opportunities to cast a ballot in early voting were actually expanded. That's the Washington Post, by the way. More than that, there are many Democrat states that allow fewer days of early voting than the Georgia or Texas law requires, including Joe Biden's home state of Delaware. When it comes to voter ID requirements, 80% of Americans favor common sense voter ID requirements, and Georgia's even accepting alternatives to driver's licenses to verify absentee voters. Democrats want you to believe that voter ID laws lead to voter suppression. But is that true? Does requiring a government-issued ID to vote really suppress minority communities? No. Well, first of all, just ask them. But if we want to look at data, researchers for the National Bureau of Economic Research found that between 2008 and 2016, voter ID laws had no negative effect on registration or turnout, overall, or for any specific group defined by race, gender, age, or party affiliation. In other words, Democrats are lying to you. Now let's take a look at Texas, where the state legislature is debating bills that Houston's mayor, Sylvester Turner, called Jim Crow 2.0.
Voter suppression is wrong, and these bills represent Jim Crow 2.0.
But here's what the bills actually do. Put safeguards in place so poll watchers aren't denied access, improving transparency and confidence in the results. Protects individuals who require assistance, such as seniors, those with vision problems, by requiring information from the assister. Why? Because those voters are more likely to be victimized by partisan activists claiming to be helping somebody with a disability. It also increases penalties against ballot harvesting, which is the practice of gathering and submitting completed absentee or mail-in voter ballots by a third party or individuals, volunteers or workers, rather than submission by voters themselves directly to ballot collection sites. It also creates uniformity in early voting times to reduce confusion while ensuring at least 12 hours a day, and polling places can be open until 9 p.m. This fixes the different voting times in different counties that were confusing voters in the past election. It prohibits universal drive-through voting, which was a logistical nightmare. Also prohibits election officials from distributing mail-in applications to people who didn't request one, and ensures polling places and machines are distributed fairly based on number of eligible voters. Democrats claimed we were trying to remove voting stations from Democrat-held areas, but that's not true at all. It's about establishing a standardized formula that is based on the number of eligible voters. And when it comes to mailing out mail-in ballots to people who didn't request them, that's a big issue in a lot of states. You might receive a ballot with other people's names on it. And when you see that ballot with somebody else's name on it and you know that you could fill it out and just turn it in, well, that removes confidence in the entire election. These reforms also require that voting machines are able to produce a paper audit trail, requires live streaming of counting for large counties as well. So, does any of that sound like racist voter suppression? No, of course not. The majority of these reforms simply unwind the emergency measures implemented during the pandemic. So why are Democrats lying about these voter integrity measures? Because they need an excuse to pass H.R. 1. They call it For the People Act, which would make permanent every problematic reform that led to the chaos of the 2020 election. It would basically make voter ID laws obsolete, puts federal government in charge of every election procedure in every single state. That's why they want you to believe these bills are supposedly racist, supposedly voter suppression, Republicans that just want to end democracy as we know it. Here's what it's woke code for, though. Republicans trying to make our elections more secure. Here's the thing. I don't think Democrats want secure elections. I think they like the chaos. They like you to distrust the election process. None of these reforms are outside the bounds of normalcy. They're common sense. Most Americans agree with that. That's the truth.